you tomorrow. I think I'm now the IT director. I got this one done.
Well, I knew the job security would run up eventually. All right,
Job security's gone.
Nah,
Thank
good.
you.
Yep. And I'll swing by closer to 6 once he's here. Or they're here. I don't know who's coming for it. Are they gonna have a PowerPoint? Do you know?
I don't.
Okay. Okay.
All right. I think
I'll
it's
swing
for
by
now,
closer
though.
to 6 then.
So, I'm thinking about how to introduce this one.
I'm sorry, say again?
I'm thinking about how to introduce this one.
Is he a Christian or is he a Muslim?
I'm pretty sure it's a Muslim. So I'm thinking about saying that, there's been a whole lot of rhetoric on both sides. There's been a whole lot of protests on both sides. And certainly want to be respectful, but we certainly want to understand as well. I'm sure your Palestinian American Society has really had to deal with this pivot a lot during these difficult times. What is the best way for us to proceed? Because I'm sure we're not the first or the last presentation.
So does he have any kind of a bio or any kind of do you know how long he's been with the organization? I would start with the facts if you have them.
Oh, yeah. Say, where are you from? What's, how long you been with them? What do you do?
Right.
Any other, is this a full-time gig or is it a?
And can you give us some of your perspective about what's been going on the last 2.5 weeks?
I think, I don't know how to do this without getting volatile. Because we certainly, most of us here, certainly have seen this through Israeli Christian eyes. But most of the people, like that woman that was on, after being there for a while, you become not anti-Israel, but you start understanding the Palestinian.
So, remind me, when we met with her, was that before or after the October 7th?
Before.
So I would be very interested to see what her take is on this as well.
Yeah, maybe she can join us again.
In light of what's happened, is she still defending Palestinian position?
Yeah, because I don't want this to turn into, I want this to be more informative. Because I think a lot of people here will be kind of blown away by the decades of really imprisonment, so to speak, of Gaza and Bethlehem. They build a fence around it, but I hear from the Israeli side, if we let them have a country, they're going to build an army, and they want to get rid of us.
So what I've heard, and this is from watching Ben Shapiro or something, on multiple occasions over many decades, time and time again, the Israelis have been willing to trade land for peace, to give them self-autonomy, all these, and they constantly say no to every deal. Doesn't matter the deal. And the reason is their one objective has never changed at the very beginning, to completely eliminate every Jew from the face of the earth. And so, how do you make it's not possible to make peace with that?
I'm with you on that.
So, and I don't know if you saw the one, I came across a thing, again, this won't come up tonight, I'm not going to raise the issue, but just the term Hamas, and that, at its core, it means violence, and
It's an acronym.
So it's both an acronym and it is a word in Arabic and a word in Hebrew. And in Hebrew, so I came across some teaching, I don't know, some of the guys from Friday Breakfast may have shared that with you, I don't know if you had a chance to watch any of those links, but.
Oh, the Ezekiel thing?
That's right. And also from Genesis, that when Sarah and Hagar, and Sarah basically, Sarah forced Abraham to make a decision to send away Hagar. The word she used was, she's brought Hamas into this house, and the two cannot dwell together. You've got to pick one and send the other off.
Really?
And that was, again, so.
You can't equate Hamas with all Muslims.
Correct.
We heard that from Noah.
Right. It's like saying that Christians are all like Waco.
The other place that word Hamas comes up in Hebrew is in the case of Noah. The world was filled with Hamas, and the Lord,
Violence all over the place.
and the Lord solution, God's solution was the flood, and so, but it's basically a spiritual, in the end of the day, it's again, not to use too strong language, not that I'm gonna say these words because of others, but it's demonic, it's a demonic spirit. The spirit of Gnosticism. Well, again, the evidence is what we saw on October 7th. What
Demonic.
It's demonic.
And
There's
this guy may not
no justification.
You know, he
I
may
can't
be totally
imagine he's gonna pronounce that.
Well, so it's really gonna depend on how much of a politician he is, and how he skirts the
Don't you
issues.
think he's gonna say, I did not say
Well,
I
But
would
the
hope
things
so.
leading up to this.
well, again, the political position of the Palestinian positions have been twisted back, and the Israelis fall, which, is again, from our perspective, is not a realistic thing, but I'm not here to challenge anybody.
Right.
You know,
We'll see if we get a few more takers here. I made the announcement on Sunday. I bet we'll get some more online.
Yeah.
well, still early. We're very excited to know that the trip is on.
Gonna go to Greece? It's a go.
Trips a go. Woo-hoo, high five.
There it is.
High five.
He's decided not to go.
Yeah, I've never been out of the country. And
You want to
Greece,
go to Israel first?
and well, Greece is nice, but if I go to Greece, I really want to go to Italy too.
Well, that
I
That's a
was thinking
separate
that.
trip.
Yeah.
That's a separate trip.
next year.
And then, so I'm thinking, maybe next fall, or maybe we'll go to Africa. Or something.
I want to go back to Africa.
I do too.
But it was just too quick to decide. And
You
it's
still can tonight,
turmoil.
midnight. Midnight you got till.
I know, it's still turmoil.
Every college assignment ever.
I'll get something to drink.
We're gonna go to Nashville.
Nashville, Greece. Nashville, Greece.
Because we took the time off, so we might.
Yeah.
Our daughter's there. She's in college there, our youngest.
We'd
She
never,
loves it.
we'd never really spent any time in Nashville until
I've never been.
taking her to school.
So check it out.
Your brother's responsible, you do that all three now?
Katie said, woo-hoo, congratulations. I only sent it to them.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll tell.
No, you couldn't tell your other two brothers. Goodness gracious, you're right, John's
He's been busy.
all the way down the other side of, good primary care, green level family medicine.
Well, yeah, emergency call.
Yeah. They must be busy to pull somebody up all the way from Wake Forest, all the way down the complete opposite corner of, something, almost all the way to Apex.
All the way down. November 7th through 19th, right?
Correct. Hello.
Hey, how's your mom doing?
She is okay.
Okay, I don't know if,
I
I don't think we've met
guess,
officially.
yes,
I'm
yes,
Caitlin.
yes. Good.
I'm actually a nurse practitioner with
That's
Mr.
right,
Ryan.
but she
Yeah.
had.
We're going, good, yeah, we're
So,
going.
yeah, she's doing okay.
We just heard.
She looks good.
Yeah.
She did look good.
So we
She's
went
screaming.
back
Oh,
up.
good. Well, that's joy. Good. I'm glad. We're,
But, she
we're
goes next
so
week
relieved.
to the vascular surgeon.
Well, I just pray
To decide what to do.
that everything in your life
So,
is a small,
pills are still-
Yes, well,
for at least 10,
That one.
15.
we've got the time off work. We, Jeremy and Katie, our other sister-in-law, are gonna come stay at our house.
I know,
We
I
have the
was
extension even.
kind of worried about
So
walking
we're-
her. I walked in and I was
So,
like,
hell of hot water,
you
but.
actually look good.
We're locked in, we're going to.
Yeah, good.
The Lord's willing, we're going.
Good.
My dad's in hospice.
I did see
So,
that.
TV, remember that term, TV, Dale Bell, it's God wills. Dale Bell,
No, no,
so, if God wills,
Still here.
they're going to go.
yeah.
It's okay.
Do you
And are
you
they
have
living
parking
separately?
I do. I park the fully parked.
So we're excited.
Stop there right at the
No,
terminal.
last week.
It's
Yeah.
at the express
Everyone
deck.
to decide.
So if you
Yeah.
would like us to.
Oh, and now everyone
Well,
said yes.
well, we
So
can-
good.
Well, that would be great, but we don't.
Yes, he
Well,
came
like
in
us
and
to
he
come pick
told
you up.
well, Jonathan's.
We'll all run together, we're all back in line, so we're not worried about that in the car,
It's
right?
exciting.
And,
They're at Matthew's plant, and she's an assistant.
Okay.
Why don't you let us come pick you up?
Okay, okay.
He's gonna be able to.
Can we come pick you up to take you to the airport?
Oh, sure. Go over there and
Right,
see
that's-
She
her.
goes pretty much
I have
every day.
a
and
Yeah.
she's
airport badge, I
She
just
has
park,
house
fully
Monday,
parking, it's in the deck where the express deck is. So it's
But
not
yeah,
ready to terminal. But it's where the airline crew,
Yeah.
it's we'll ride that express deck shuttle in.
Perfect.
It's really easy.
That'd be great.
I touched base with Miriam a couple weeks ago. She sounds like she's doing well. She's settling in up there, and they founded a new church. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Went
it's
to-
Right now, they're putting a new siding on our house.
I can't remember. There's
Yeah.
that picture.
Yeah.
That's
You
not.
got another picture?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Good space in the middle for
It's
them.
Baptist.
Yeah.
She's Lutheran, so
Yeah.
it's lately takes off kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the same thing, Jesus texted my brothers.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had her.
Exactly, yeah.
That's old.
So.
Yes, yes,
That's a
yeah.
big.
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
message about her needed to be singing, and I was like, oh, I'll actually sing her. And
Is that Hardy board or what is that?
It's a poly, it's a real heavy poly
Well,
with a styrofoam
Yes,
back.
to-
So like-
You want to be posted and see what they decide. Between that and the trip, it's just having a lot of trouble with that graft. I mean, she's had it.
little arms.
She's like,
Oh, that still doesn't show the other, well, up there, that's the old.
Yeah, really, I know, yeah.
That's awesome.
She said, it's so nice, they don't have to exactly what she said, they don't have to say.
Yeah, and yes,
We-
exactly.
you know,
I don't, she's not one to be in like an infectious, she's like our patients that get
Right.
infections.
Yeah.
We're doing the last two bathrooms.
It's really, really good.
They are.
So never ending.
They're the ones that change.
Well, I've still got some rotten wood around the deck and the other
Okay,
places,
okay,
so,
yeah,
and the soil,
Yeah,
so it's like,
yeah.
Yeah,
And
the deck's
it's
next,
resting
yes.
regularly,
Yeah.
so
we put
I
down
would think
tracks.
her
And
resting
that
Yeah.
material is the best thing ever. Get away from that.
They can do something
Yeah,
different.
whatnot.
We were here to see, clean it out again, and then they take that and then it clots again.
This is Karen, this is Howard. You're back in the land of the living for about
No idea.
Then the squirrels come,
That's what I
hanging out even more.
But that really, and then now Wednesdays and goes down, and we, sometimes, every time we play something like that, it's the same spot, and then the tech, you know, she was like, but yeah, I was gone like a week, and like, I was like, here's Florida, it's been 2 hours.
I know, are you going to Gracie?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But she's a happy, she.
Yeah, good.
Well, it's good to see you.
I'll let you know.
All right, I thought about her and asked about her, yeah, I'll learn, you're welcome.
So. Okay. Yeah, celebrate.
He was here.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to say that.
Yeah, we already discussed that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we can just.
Yeah, a lot better than we got door to door service.
Yeah.
He was just one of the first, yeah, it was.
He had some authority.
They don't have global
Some knowledge.
We run a global area. We have TSA food check.
They don't know why
nobody's on.
We've got global.
Now, one thing I did do, we have Verizon, your cell phone, Verizon. So, with Verizon, you can go put your phone on international.
Stressing over this. I know, well, you know, I stole the damn leg. Lunch, we didn't get back, I didn't get back. No.
I don't want it, I mean, the third row, we got one right.
Just
How's that, Daisy?
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good news is we got.
Parents treating you good?
It's in trouble. Motor trouble. Oh, and we were out in the middle of.
We have a big green.
Or got to pull the back off of it.
We have
Just
a green
stuff.
Yeah.
There's got one other boats on the way.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
Went to his wages and 350 pounds back in.
Switch it back.
Yeah, that's what we have at the table.
And then,
I don't know,
ours
switch
is
it.
Make it effective immediately, and then, you know,
we can roll it out or.
later, cancel it, and then next.
Oh, ours is built in the,
A lot less
in the
expensive.
tape, yeah.
If you're interested in having international talk.
We have a tailgate window that's.
So I got GT9.
They bought it.
You really like it, right?
That's
It'd be nice to be able to catch
Well,
calls.
then
we should
Dan's
be
gonna
able
come
to
to
hook
your
up.
house and go, because he just likes
Yeah, we'll
both.
figure out.
Yeah, talking,
Just be able to.
Both going.
We're not that fancy.
I've seen some that does hammers. You heard me, I love the grill I have now, but I can't do it on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, yeah, the turkey.
We tried.
We do the turkey on the green.
I do,
And we
I
just
don't
pork
like,
butts.
I don't like swallow, I like
Where's
brisket,
why I like
and I
brisket?
like, and.
We're so
celebration.
We're so need to test.
Well, because in
going
Vegas, you
to
just
the
turkey.
channel.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I do like making some pizza, you do all kinds of stuff.
You can do, you know, but the desserts, I don't like the desserts on the egg because your peach cobbler tastes like.
We should do the same.
Charcoal.
We're gonna have
I
to-
don't even do eggs, I
Unless you're doing like Dutch oven, church oven,
like,
still.
like rolls,
Still.
Italian
Yeah.
sausages, I don't like eggs, I just want to grill. We're ours right now.
So are you doing both?
We did that.
We heard that sooner.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well,
And so what was your advice?
we had that dinner, so I guess we already know which flights, now they just have to.
I got a charcoal.
I don't think the fifty
There you go.
I know it.
LP gas and propane, same thing.
It's not my favorite,
Yeah.
but it was in great.
Well, we're not.
Yeah, Charlotte.
We're just.
Oh, true.
Air,
Yeah.
natural
I
gas.
don't know.
What is it?
What's Don's hard, setting you
Yeah.
straight. Oh, it's not Don, it's my dad. Oh, your dad, no. Don would be like,
What lake are you building?
we are,
Are you any takers yet?
we have a place.
I'm not sure.
We've had it.
Did you tear it down and now you're redoing?
That's true. We're not gonna-
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, thanks, Scott. Woo.
I agree that it's a dinner, but not one concert.
He's like looking down into whatever Zoom he's, it looks like he's like doing a lurch.
Yeah, I tell Kevin the same thing, I'm like, look, lurch.
All right, welcome. Can you all hear me online? Jim, can you hear me?
Or we have
Yes.
Hey Rodney, can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay?
I'm good. Hey, how are you?
Good. Are we gonna have dinner on Thursday night?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow night. We'll bring the boy up. I don't know if anybody knows that this is Nathan's father-in-law up here on the.
Yes.
Right there.
Guys.
You know?
For Greece?
Yeah.
I don't know the numbers, but he texted me saying the Greece trip is on.
Okay, well, that's real.
Yeah, the Greece trip is on. So I did text him to, what kind of numbers do we have? Did you hear that, Rodney? The Greece trip is on.
Yep. Okay.
All right, so he said this. Yeah, I wonder, what if I,
Right, not good for times of war.
I sent him a text, I promise I did.
They don't put anything in there. They're not doing anything, so.
So you all have till midnight tonight, if you're on the fence, you can still join us. You're thinking about it, aren't you, Bob? That or Nashville? There's no footsteps of Paul in Nashville. So isn't that, where is Nashville? Where else is that?
What?
No, I'm thinking about a different city in Egypt. There's another,
Gonna follow Johnny.
yeah, Johnny Cash.
Memphis.
Memphis, I'm thinking about, that's it. Yeah, Nashville didn't sound right.
I would rather let you take it.
I would have gotten there.
No, I just wanted to say.
Hey, Tony.
Hey, we're not sure. How are you?
All right, we have 20 for Greece.
So we need 2 more?
No, I think we're good.
Yes.
Greece is on. Are you guys doing Greece?
Yeah.
All right. So Greece is on. We're going to, I'm going to talk to Elias tomorrow more in detail, and then we're going to probably next Wednesday for our last class on November 1st, we'll probably get together and kind of go through more of the itinerary and the Bible study part of it, just a big overview. And then Karen has offered her home on November 5th. That's a Sunday, right? Offered her place on November 5th for the travelers to get together and talk more logistics about packing and tip money and what to wear and suitcase, stuff like that. So more details going to go out there. So I'm really glad.
So we'll have a lot of time between the fifth and the second.
Right, yeah, one day.
How much time do you need? That's 2 days.
We can do it.
Yeah, 'cause we don't get till 7, you know what they do?
Everything you wanted to carry on, Grace.
Suitcase, passport, you're good.
All right. Diane, Bay, Art, come on in. There's some other seats here available. I'm trying to remember the name of the person that's supposed to be joining us here. All right. Oh, here's some more. Oh, I'm thinking it's Rania Must. Hey, Zila. Hey, Rania.
Hi everyone.
Hey there.
Hi.
We'll get to you in just a second. We have more people joining. All right. It's a little after 6:01. Okay, we'll see if anybody else shows up. We made the announcement, Rania, on Sunday morning, a couple days ago. Anybody wants to join us, so we'll have more than our usual class here. Of course, we had a trip planned to the Holy Land here on November 7th. And that, of course, has been canceled. We're going to Greece instead. Yeah, so we're going to follow the footsteps of Paul. We've got about 20 people going on that trip, so very excited about that. And if anybody is still interested, you know, you got till midnight tonight to weigh the options and join us. I'm very thankful for Elias for pivoting so quickly, for finding flights and hotels and even a place on the cruise. You might be, you know, rowing, but you're got a place on the cruise. So we're glad this is gonna work out quickly. And I'm very grateful. Oh, your name's not Rania, it's Bashma?
No, it's Besma. So we have one professional Zoom account, so it's always automatically on our directors. So I realized when you called me Ronnie, I'm like, oh, gotta fix that.
Well, we are very grateful that you're joining us here this evening. This is a group originally getting together for that trip to the Holy Land, as we were just wanting to learn more and more about the dynamics there. I covered more kind of the biblical, historical, but I'm not as familiar with the modern day. And so like, it was maybe 2 months ago that I reached out to the Palestinian American Society. I think you're in New Jersey, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, we're in New Jersey.
So I reached out, and then I reached out to the Jewish Community Center here in Charlotte, and we had a speaker. We had another person who lives in Amman, Jordan, who was an American who lives over there for about 10 years. And so we've gotten a really good background in all this. Of course, as of October 7th, all of this has changed. Certainly,
She's a Syrian refugee in Amman, Jordan.
certainly with travel plans, but also with the whole dynamics. And I know there's been a whole lot of rhetoric on both sides. There have been protests on both sides of this war. There's been a lot of civilian deaths on both sides of this war, all of which are a tragedy. And so I'm not exactly sure how to proceed here. I'm going to rely on you, Basma. I'm sure that your society up in New Jersey has had to do these presentations a lot in the past couple of weeks. And I'm sure that you've had to pivot along the way and maybe even change your presentation depending on your audience. So we have a varied group of people here. I think we'll be open to hearing what you have to say. So again, welcome, thank you for joining us. And what do you think is the best way to proceed here?
Sorry. So I actually, so I took on, as you know, Abir was our former education director. So I took on her position just last month. So it's been, just like you said, once after October 7th, everything has changed. But I actually have gone over the presentation she was going to do with you, and I think other than obviously our discussion could add to it, the presentation itself is still pretty relevant, and we can just build upon the discussion at the end if that works for you.
That'd be great. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you from New Jersey, or where are you from? And is this your full-time gig, or you do something else? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so hi everybody. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for coming with open minds and open hearts, and we really appreciate it. So my name is Besma Bisharat. I was born and raised in New Jersey, between Clifton and Patterson, so always in New Jersey. I actually was a full-time public school teacher, special education, for 4 years. And then this year I made a complete shift in profession, not complete, but I did make a big change and received this offer to work full-time at the Palestinian American Community Center. I always was involved in some ways, but more as like volunteer or part-time. So making the switch to a full-time position here it was a big decision. But I will say I feel very blessed in it. I feel like everything happens for a reason. So I just hope I can do the best job I can with it. Besides that, I have a son. He's 5 years old. He's a handful. And we actually went to Palestine for the first, well, I've been my whole life, but this past summer was the first time I was able to take him to Palestine. So we could even talk about that later in the presentation, the experience of visiting. And I know if you were able to go, you'd have seen that too.
Yeah, whereabouts in Palestine is your family?
We're in the West Bank, so Ramallah. I don't know how much you covered. So we are close to Jerusalem. So before all of the events of when the annexations happened and when everything got separated, we were actually right next to Jerusalem. But then when the West Bank got separated from the territories that were taken and kind of split, now we're close, but it is a challenge. I'll be honest, this summer, because of this program that happened, I was able to go to Jerusalem and I was able to take my son, but before this year, like before the summer, I was not allowed because even though I'm an American citizen, I also was a Palestinian citizen. Again, that's something else we could talk about today. I have that all in the presentation. It's a lot to go over.
Okay. What's the relationship between the Gaza Strip and West Bank?
Good question. So, basically, I don't know, do you want me to just get into the presentation because all of this is covered? Just so it kind of gives it a little bit of the context. And bear with me, everyone. I apologize for any issues I would have in presenting because the internet was lagging a little bit, but hopefully it's good. Let me just
You should be able to share screen.
Yeah. Right.
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. Slideshow. All right, so just this is just an overview of the Palestinian struggle. So today we're going to go over what's going on, and I think that's more to the end of the current situation. But before that, we'll go over a few key terms. Palestine as part of social justice, some of the history, and then the current events. So this is also the issue with the internet. Some of this was not playing directly the embedded video, so I do have it attached. So as I'm sure you've gone over, Jerusalem is the hub for and Palestine has a lot of historical significance for all religions. So I just want to give a little bit of the context of Jerusalem. So I actually found an updated video, and this was from 4 days ago, about Palestinians' experiences in Jerusalem. So I'm gonna play this first.
There's no audio here. You probably have to go out, and when you share screen, say you gotta click share audio too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I always forget that part. So stop sharing.
Okay.
And when you share again, click the thing in the lower left-hand corner about share audio.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. I was always a Google Meets person, my old job, so Zoom is a little different for me. Okay.
Palestinians who wanted to pray there.
I lived from 50 years until now in old city. All the same, every time the same, but this time they make too much problems for Palestinian people. And if they go to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, they close for all young people. Only 70 years old, they can enter inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this is nothing new. Every time they make like that.
The Waqf Authority, who administers inside the compound, said only 5,000 Palestinians were allowed to pray. On a typical Friday, at least 40,000 Palestinians worship.
It seems Israeli police, as an occupying power in occupied Jerusalem, learned a lesson from last week. Palestinians held Friday prayer in here even after police imposed age restrictions on those allowed to enter Al-Aqsa last week. But today, the police prevented Palestinians from coming here by attacking with stun grenades and tear gas.
Israel also used water cannons to disperse a handful of Palestinian protesters in occupied East Jerusalem neighborhoods. Only a small number of Palestinians prayed in different streets of the city, but the occupied West Bank was a hotbed for clashes. In cities like Bethlehem and Al Khalil, Palestinians threw stones and burned tires. Israeli army attacks injured more than 20 Palestinians, and a Palestinian child died from a bullet wound to the chest after being hit by Israeli army fire. In Ramallah, Palestinians protested Israel's brutal attacks on civilians living in Gaza.
I want to convey a message to the Israeli occupier and say, let your army compete with another army, not with civilians. You are losing and will be defeated, even if 10,000 people from the West Bank and Gaza are martyred.
At least from the Palestinian Authority, let the people say what they want to say. At least. We know the capabilities of the Palestinian Authority, so we're not asking for a lot of them. Just let the people represent themselves as they want.
Israeli leaders signaled their intention for a military assault inside the Gaza Strip. As the war intensifies, it is highly likely that the security situation in both occupied West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem will worsen as well. Mustafa Fatih, Ustayat World, occupied East Jerusalem.
So to give some context on that, so for the question of the difference between the West Bank and Gaza, so back when I want to show you the map. So the West Bank and Gaza were separated. So the West Bank remained the West Bank remained under Israeli authority. So if you noticed, the people that are in Jerusalem, you saw the checkpoints, you saw soldiers, and then you also saw the Palestinian Authority. So Israeli military presence remained in the West Bank, but after but Gaza was separated. So this map isn't the right one, but they separated Gaza and the West Bank. So the West Bank remained under Israeli control. But Gaza, Israel withdrew back in 2008. But when it withdrew, troops that were on the ground, but the blockade or the siege surrounding Gaza remained. So West Bank and Gaza are completely separated. Palestinians cannot go. So as a Palestinian from the West with identity in the West Bank, I cannot go to Gaza, and Palestinians with IDs in Gaza cannot go to the West Bank. At the same time, any Palestinians who remained under Israeli rule, so in Jerusalem, for example, that's separated from the West Bank, that's Israel, Palestinians from the West Bank cannot enter into Israel freely. So you're separated by these ID cards. So freedom of movement is very limited. So that's why I mentioned that in the summer, for me, it was the first time I was able to go to Jerusalem because Jerusalem is under Israeli occupied territory. So as a Palestinian, I couldn't go, but because this summer there was the visa waiver program, so any US citizens were allowed to go, even if they had Palestinian citizenship, but that was the first time that was allowed as part of a pilot program. And that was because there was a deal brokered between US and Israel that any Palestinian Americans should still be allowed to go to Israel because they're US citizens, but the Palestinian citizens were still and are still not allowed. So they mentioned in the video, this was 4 days ago, that Palestinians in the West Bank, because they're limited in their movement, are not allowed to go into Israel. So even though it's just a drive over, Israel does not allow Palestinians from the West Bank to enter unless given a specific permission, and if they apply for it, and even then there's issues. So they said, like, even though Jerusalem is considered a holy land for everyone, many Palestinians are not allowed for Friday prayers. Over my lifetime, I've had many issues when I've attempted to go into Jerusalem to pray on Friday prayers, and this happens a lot during Ramadan, which is the holy month for Palestinians. And recently there were even issues for many Christians that entered in the holy land for praying, because we know that it's holy for all three religions. Even then, there have been accounts of Christians having problems as well.
Do Israelis have full travel access in the West Bank, or even if they wanted to go to Gaza, do they have freedom of travel?
They do not go into Gaza because Israel withdrew from Gaza. They don't enter in, they do not go into Gaza. For the West Bank, they are allowed to go into the West Bank. Often you'll see signs that will say it's dangerous to enter, but settlers, Israelis are allowed into the West Bank, any areas. They typically don't go because it's kind of it's a segregation system. However, especially recently, many towns, because we have what's called settlements. So Israelis are allowed allowed to enter into areas where they create settlements. So if you see a lot of the towns of Palestine, even in the West Bank where it's supposed to be Palestinian territory, are losing more and more of their land, and instead they're being replaced with Israeli settlements. So it'll be towns of houses that Israelis will be invited, for anyone that's has Jewish heritage is invited and allowed to come into those settlements and start a home there. So I just want to show you. So in 1945, and I could talk a little bit about the history of it, of Zionism and how Israel was established. This is the progression of towns and villages. So originally, this is the progression of Palestinian life in Palestine. So we started here in 1945, before 1948, which is the establishment of Israel. And this is the expulsion of these towns. And then in 1948, 220 plus Palestinian towns and villages were depopulated before Arab forces entered Palestine. So either they were told they should evacuate and will be allowed to go back into their homes because of the war, because of Israel's entry into Palestine. And of course, that didn't happen. Many Palestinians in 1948, this is when this whole area of Palestine was depopulated by forced expulsion, and that's the Nakba, which we could talk about now. And then from 1949, 300 plus further Palestinian localities were depopulated. And that was after Arabs tried to enter into the war and support Palestinians. Even more Palestinians were removed.
Are you saying that the Palestinians were, they weren't banished from Israel, but they were kind of consolidated into fewer and fewer villages? Is that it?
No, so we call it the Nakba. It's the forced expulsion. So all of the areas that I was just referring to, so Jerusalem and the areas that were taken in 1948, so Palestinians were forced out of those areas, so all this area here, and either were moved to other towns of Palestine. Many of the Palestinians living now in Gaza originally lived in those areas, but they were forced to become refugees and traveled down here to Gaza. So I want to show you a video of actually, first I'm going to start with an explanation of Zionism, which is the establishment of Israel and how that happened. So after World War II, we all know the worldwide guilt of where all the Jewish victims of the Holocaust needed a place to stay. And the solution was, why don't they go to Palestine? Because before this, Palestinians and many Jewish people, so Palestinian Muslims, Jews, and Palestinian Christians all lived together in Palestine. But the proposal of creating a state of Israel happened after World War II. So this will explain that with the explanation of Zionism. Just pause.
What is Zionism? Zionism is a political and national movement aimed at creating and sustaining a Jewish state in the Middle East. Now, according to many traditional and Orthodox Jewish teachings, Jews are forbidden by God to have their own state until their Messiah comes. But this hasn't stopped Zionism from pushing towards that very goal. So where did this all start? Let's go back to 1897. A man named Theodor Herzl formed the World Zionist Organization. He advocated for the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine and is even mentioned in the Israeli Declaration of Independence. It was tough to be a Jew in Europe in that time, with anti-Semitic sentiments rising. Herzl felt the only way for his people to live in peace was for them to have their own country. Palestine was chosen, and a popular slogan started spreading around the world. A land without a people, for a people without a land. The only problem was, Palestine wasn't a land without a people. A large number of Muslims and Christians, along with a smaller number of Jews, had been living there together, in peace for centuries. But for many Christian Zionists living in the West, and Jewish Zionists living in Europe, that made little difference. Following the fall of the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I, and along with British support, Jewish immigration to the newly British-occupied Palestine was steady in the early 20th century. Then there was a turning point, World War II. Following the Holocaust, the flow of Jews to occupied Palestine boomed, and many Western countries began backing the idea of a Jewish state in Palestine. Although a UN resolution recommended both an independent Arab and Jewish state in the region, Israel went ahead and declared their independence in 1948 and was recognized by US President Harry Truman that very same day. The Zionist movement had achieved its main victory. In the period after its establishment, Israel carried out an invasion of neighboring countries, and at the end of 1967's Six-Day War, Israel extended its control in the region, displacing countless Christian and Muslim Palestinians. A year later, the 28th World Zionist Congress adopted the Jerusalem Program, a list of 5 goals, which are the current makeup of modern Zionism: the unity of the Jewish people and the centrality of Israel in Jewish life, the ingathering of the Jewish people in its historic homeland, the strengthening of the State of Israel, which is based on the prophetic vision of justice and peace, the preservation of the identity of the Jewish people through the fostering of Jewish and Hebrew education, and the protection of Jewish rights everywhere. In practice, their goals of justice and peace have been lost to many of the non-Jewish people living in the region. The Israeli military has been illegally controlling and occupying much of Palestine, and constant new illegal settlement building on Palestinian land by the Zionist state has been condemned by much of the international community. So what do you think about Zionism?
So I want to focus with this video. It's very important because this is something that you'll often hear, this accusation or this assumption that the issue is Muslims versus Jews or Palestinians versus Jews, and it doesn't have anything to do with religion. The issue is the political movement. So the Zionist political agenda is, we established Israel because, and with this idea, like that phrase, a land without a people without a land, but it completely disregarded the fact that there are people there are Palestinians there, and the only way that the establishment of Israel came about was through the forced expulsion of the Palestinians living there. So you asked a very good question, which was, well, when Israel was established, what about the Palestinians? Did they just move? What did they do? So this is what we call the Nakba. The establishment happened with the Nakba is an Arabic word for catastrophe. And I do have one more video about that and the establishment.
One of the biggest problems in our society is food waste.
Sorry about that.
But now, also you can make a difference. Starting
70 years have passed since the Nakba, the catastrophe in Arabic, took place in Palestine in 1948, in which more than 750,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced from their homes.
I just want to zoom in on this.
Arrow down?
Yeah. Okay. No. I know, I'm like, oh, there it is.
Homes and pushed into refugee camps in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and neighboring countries. But the Nakba didn't end in 1948. The catastrophe continues to affect more than 12 million Palestinians, who remain stateless today. Historical Palestine was mostly made up of Palestinian Muslims, Christians, and a small number of Jews, who generally lived together peacefully. The persecution of Jews across Europe led them to believe that they were not safe there, and Zionists saw Palestine as a prime location for a Jewish homeland.
And it was clear that there were Palestinians on the land. The Zionist leaders and common people alike got used to the idea that the only way of making Palestine a Jewish state is by causing the Palestinians to leave.
The Jewish Zionist movement began organizing immigration and buying land in Palestine. This was the first step in turning Palestine into a Jewish homeland. Then World War I began. Britain promised Zionist support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. This came as a formal political letter known today as the Balfour Declaration. It also included that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. When World War I ended and the Ottoman Empire was defeated, Britain occupied Palestine.
Britain provided the muscle under which they could simply emigrate. I mean, they couldn't have immigrated were it not for the British presence. Because the crucial battle in the early stages was simply getting Jews into Palestine and acquiring land. They couldn't have done that without British government's sponsorship.
Jewish migration into Palestine continued for decades, and the Palestinian people organized large demonstrations against this influx. Palestinians saw British support of Zionism as biased and unfair. So the people of Palestine revolted in 1936 to fight against British and Zionist occupation. During the 3-year uprising, thousands of Palestinians were killed and hundreds of...
So just to clarify, I'm sorry if I think we started with questions and then moved on to history. After the Ottoman Empire lost its control, Britain and France kind of cut up pieces of the Middle East, of whatever the Ottoman Empire used to control. So Britain took control of Palestine first, and then when Britain took control, it said they have to respect the Palestinian people. But then once the Holocaust happened and there was this entire Jewish people, that they said, well, where we need to have a place for the for Jews as a homeland. So then Britain offered, because Britain had control at the time, Britain offered Palestine as this place. So then, as mentioned, an influx of Jews started to immigrate and were encouraged to immigrate, but that's when the Palestinians started to revolt, that why this whole large group of people are coming in. And this is all leading up to the 1948 Nakba.
British citizens and Jewish Zionists died as well. Britain dismantled the Palestinian Revolution, leaving them with no political or military leadership. However, the British also began limiting Jewish migration. This upset the Jews who had fought with the British during the uprising and led them to create their own forces. Zionist militias carried out bombing attacks against both the British and the Palestinians. As things got out of hand, the British announced in 1947 that they'd be ending their mandate on Palestine. The file on Palestine was then transferred to the UN, which suggested dividing Palestine into an Arab and Jewish state. As the British were preparing to leave, the new Jewish population began taking over, and it helped that they were heavily armed. The ethnic cleansing of Palestinians began months before the British officially left Palestine. Zionists were taking over major cities and hundreds of villages, forcing thousands of Palestinians into neighboring countries.
It happened many times that the Israeli, very holy soldiers took 10 of the youngsters in the middle of the village, shot them just in order to kill them, in order that all the others will see it and run away. And if it's not enough, they took others also.
The British ended their mandate on May 14, 1948, leaving their tanks and armored weapons to the newly created State of Israel. From the time the British occupied Palestine in 1917 to when they left in 1948, the number of Jews is estimated to have multiplied 10 times to 500,000. As Zionist Jews declared the State of Israel on May 14, 1948, the surrounding Arab nations declared war, with the objective of liberating Palestine. Although Palestine had the support of other Arab nations and they outnumbered the Jewish population, the Israelis also had foreign military, political, and financial support.
They were a highly prepared, highly dedicated, well-armed fighting force, which was superior to all the Arab armies combined.
Israel grew beyond the UN partition lines during the Arab-Israeli War by destroying Arab villages and further reducing the Palestinian population. By April 1949, more than 500 villages and 10 cities were captured by the Israelis. Over 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes, and over 13,000 Palestinians had been killed. Even then, the Nakba did not end. Today, Israel occupies the whole of historical Palestine.
So if you saw that map, it shows you the areas of the West Bank and Gaza and how it was split. So Israel got this major middle part, but and then the Palestinians were split between the West Bank and Gaza.
Israelis continue to build illegal settlements on occupied Palestinian territories. Palestinians in the West Bank live under military law, which subjects them to checkpoints, curfews, and arbitrary arrests. Palestinians in Gaza live under a blockade imposed by Israel. Gaza is set to become unlivable by 2020. Palestinians today continue to demand their right to return to their homes. For them, the Nakba will not end until this right is granted.
So to go back to the question of how it happened, so Palestinians were forcibly removed or killed during the Nakba to establish the state of Israel. And you might hear it if you talk to a Palestinian right now today. A lot of major leaders are talking about this idea of with what's happening right now in Gaza. Thousands of Palestinians are being killed. It's only been 2 weeks, and we've lost at least 5,000 Palestinians that have been killed in the bombing, and these are civilians. And much of the argument you'll hear is that this is looking like another Nakba, because this is another way of killing the Palestinians that are living there, and then being able to take the land at the end of it. So at the end, once again, it's not a religious issue or a religious conflict. It's a political one, and it's going back to this state that wants to take over more land at the expense of the Palestinians living there. Any questions? I know it's a lot all at once.
I think there's a lot of questions here. Tell us about Hamas. Where did it come from? What does the word Hamas mean? And certainly, someone that is pro-Palestine probably can't support the atrocities that Hamas would even do. And we realize that all of Palestinian is not Hamas. That's a small subset of Palestinians. So give us a background of Hamas.
Okay, so this is always okay. So like I said, the establishment of Israel was in 1948. Hamas was not even established until 1987. And actually, I'll give you some of the history of the establishment of Hamas. So like I said, we had the West Bank, and then we had Gaza. Fatah was the major party in the 80s. And Fatah is still around today. So right now, if you, in a very simple way, you can compare Fatah and Hamas to the Democrats and Republicans of America. Those were the two major parties in Palestine. So it's kind of like that. Back in the 80s, at the time, ironically enough, Fatah was an armed struggle. So the political party of Fatah, there was an armed movement to fight back against Israel. And Israel actually established Hamas. Israel as a state helped establish the political party of Hamas to combat Fatah, because at the time Fatah was an armed movement. However, then over time, Fatah actually conceded to many of Israel's demands and ended up becoming more of a peaceful party, and Hamas ended up becoming more of the armed struggle. So that's one thing that really we should pay attention to. And then the other issue, so Hamas is the governing party in Gaza, and Hamas was voted into that. So like I said, Gaza was right now, West Bank is still under Israeli military control, but Fatah is the ruling party. Whereas in Gaza, Israel withdrew their military like ground presence, and instead they left the country, they left the area of Gaza because it's still part of Palestine. They withdrew from there in the ground, but there's still the siege on Gaza. But this is so. But Hamas was still the governing party that was voted on in Gaza. One thing I do want to say, we 100%, right? We all agree that no one can condone any violence in any way. But at the same time, so October 7th, the events of October 7th, we're still getting into light of what happened. So there's a lot of fabrication in mainstream media about it. So for example, like there was if anyone saw, President Biden was on the news and talked about how he saw pictures of Hamas beheading 40 Israeli babies. Immediately after, they redacted that statement, and that is not true. That did not happen. There were deaths, of course, and any civilian deaths we always condone, whether it's on either side. But since then, Israel's response has been a total blockade of Gaza and a total attack on Gaza, on the civilians of Gaza. So right now, like I said, in just these 2 weeks, 5,000 Palestinian citizens have been killed through bombings of Gaza. And right now, what we're starting to see too is because of the blockade, and this was before this, the people of Gaza are not allowed clean water. They are not allowed fuel, electricity. Only the other day, there was some humanitarian aid allowed in, but it was only 20 trucks. On a daily basis, they consume much more than that. So 20 trucks was not enough. Yesterday, many of the hospitals said that their fuel source, therefore their electricity, has been shut down. So the Palestinians in Gaza there are not only either being bombed, actively being bombed right now, or are running out of basic human needs. So not to tell you, like, not to go off of your question, but I think it's very important that we have to see all sides of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to stop there, and I'm sure there's a question or two from the group here. If not, I got several.
Yeah, I have a comment actually. So you mentioned that Israel is trying to get in there and blockade Gaza and stuff, but the events of October 7th were a terrorist attack, okay? And Israel has a right to defend and go after the terrorists and eliminate them completely. Irrespective, they've been kind enough to go and give, share leaflets and tell people to move off. So Israel has been very kind in informing all the people of Gaza to move away before they attack or do anything. That is part of their military strategy. So I don't see Israel really going after the Palestinians. They're trying to go after Hamas and the terrorists who have taken over hostages, besides having killed 1,200 people out there. So, I mean, irrespective, it is an issue. If it had happened in the US would go and bomb them out.
Do you understand that it's babies that are being killed and bombed?
Yeah, I understand everything.
No. I'm sorry, I let you speak. I have to say something. We have to really think critically about the portrayal of mainstream media and this image that we're told, and it's dehumanizing to Palestinians. You just said that they're bombing terrorists. They are bombing hospitals, they are bombing churches, they are bombing homes. If you check, I understand what the mainstream media says and I understand what the news says, but if you see the people living in Gaza, they are the ones that are being bombed. They are the ones being killed.
Okay, another question here.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
So, Basma, who do you believe, if there is an entity within Hamas, made the decision to strike in the first place Israel? And if you know, and I think there's probably a few things out there, but or what do you believe it was?
Or maybe can I frame that question a little bit differently? What was the reason for that preemptive strike?
Yeah.
I mean, what was to hope to gain from the preemptive strike that Hamas did on October 7th?
Thank you for that question. So a week before the October 7th attack, I myself wrote this statement. So I mentioned Israeli settlements. A lot of the areas in the West Bank are surrounded by Israeli settlements. And like I mentioned before, Israel's goal is to continue to control Palestine and to control more land. A week before the October 7th attack, there were we have one of our community members, a friend of mine, her home was burnt in a total fire, their entire home. There was an increase in Israeli settler violence. So right now, everyone's focus is on Gaza. My family is from the West Bank. I've been getting reports by them of, first of all, the Palestinians in the West Bank, this is under military Israeli occupation, have not been allowed entry, have not been allowed exit out of the towns in the West Bank because Israeli soldiers and Israeli settlers block it. So there's been an increase this past month in Israeli settler violence. So these are Israelis that have come to Israel to live in Israel. They are armed. They are armed often by the military, and are allowed free reign to any kind of violence. So right now, since the bombing in Gaza has happened, there's also been an uptick of Israeli settler violence towards Palestinians. So that is, this is from what we're understanding of why the Hamas attack was initiated. It was in response to the increasing Israeli violence, as well as the violence in Jerusalem. So we said that Jerusalem is supposed to be an area for all people in Palestine to worship freely, whether Palestinian Muslim, Christians, or Jews. And there was an increase in violence towards the Palestinians there in Jerusalem as well.
Okay. Basma, can you give us a little bit of background? You just mentioned that one of Israel's purpose is to occupy and control more land. From the news, I'm not even sure where I've heard this, that the Palestinian, or perhaps Hamas, their purpose is the complete eradication of the Israeli state from the sea to the river. Is that something that we're just hearing that's not true? Where did that come from?
So there's different political, this is when I go back to talking about different politics. So we have different ideas and different beliefs. There's the idea of the two-state solution, which is that Israel will have a separate area and Palestine will have a separate area. Then the other movement is just a one-state solution, that everyone can somehow live freely, which they did before the establishment of Israel. Palestinians and Jews were living together. So there's different beliefs. Each person has a different belief. Again, the issue here is that there was with the establishment of Israel, and then again later on over time, the establishment of Israel should have allowed Palestinians to live in their homes and to live in Palestine and keep their homes in Palestine. But as time goes on, as you can see here, that more and more land is just being taken. So there are constantly UN violations occurring. So the United Nations, the establishment of settlements and the continual establishment of settlements is illegal by UN law because these are considered Palestinian territories. But it doesn't stop Israel from establishing more and more of the settlements. Just like I mentioned with the siege on Gaza, Israel controls the caloric intake of Gaza. In one of the videos, it mentioned a study that said that by 2020, Gaza will be unlivable. It's already 2023 now. So, and they're still living there. There's literally a limit on the food and water and supplies that Gaza's allowed entry, that the people of Gaza are allowed. The fact that the past few days, 2 major churches were bombed, and churches and hospitals are used as places of refuge during a siege, so during bombing, and they are being targeted.
Okay, but I want to go back to that phrase, that idea about the eradication of the Israeli state. Is that just a small minority, or where does that phrase come from?
So the eradication of the Israeli state. So there is a belief that that Palestine should go back to being Palestine. So it goes back to the right of return. That Palestinians that were living in all of those areas should be allowed to go back into their homes. I don't know about the eradication, but I think that there's a different way that it's being framed. It's not about eradicating the Israeli state. It's about allowing Palestinians back into the state of Palestine and what is now Israel.
Okay. Another question.
When I was a young child, I had a globe, and it showed, it didn't have the word Jordan, it had the word Palestine, and it was essentially the shape of Jordan. And I'm wondering, does Palestine historically extend significantly into Jordan? Does Jordan have a role in all this?
Yeah, so Palestine and Jordan are neighboring. So when I mentioned, so the borders you can literally drive through. Before the Ottoman Empire, a lot of areas, so this is like back, there wasn't even separation between states, right? So a lot of the areas were together, and that's the same with worldwide. So there is definitely a connection between them, but I can't tell you, I'm sorry, the exact detail of like when each state was established. But I know a lot of times, so when you look at a map with the establishment of Israel, many maps don't even recognize Palestine. As a child, I struggled with this because I would tell teachers I'm from Palestine, and they're like, well, that's not even on the map. That's not a country.
What I'm hearing from you, Basma, I certainly understand from the standpoint of the Gaza Strip. You've got 2.5 million people living in a place that's 25 miles long, 6 miles across. And there's a wall around it on Egyptian side and on the Israeli side. And Israel, of course, determines what goes in and what comes out and everything else. Are you suggesting with this whole long history of tension and violence that it was eventually just a boiling pot that was going to explode at some point? Is that what came up to the October 7th? Just the explosion there of years of what went on beforehand?
So it's not even about an explosion or of like the October 7th being the focus. So everyone is talking about how October 7th is this focus, but that's not the focus. Like we mentioned before, I didn't even get into the Nakba. So 1948 is a mass expulsion of Palestinians. That was the initial, where Palestinians were forcibly removed from their homes and thousands were killed. Then again, it happened 1967, it happened all over again. Then there's so many different points in history I could talk to you about, but Palestinians are living under constant encroachment and constant killing and constant forced removal. So it's not October 7th being what started it all. This was 75 years of occupation. It may have just been noticed recently by mainstream media and Western media because this is the response, but I think that this was a long time. Like, this is something that's been happening for much longer.
Other questions? Anybody online a question? Do you have anything more on your presentation that you wanted to cover, Basma?
So like we said, if anyone has questions, what's happening now, like I mentioned, Gaza this is just some guides for us. This was a video, if anyone wants to see, there's many documentaries on Gaza. This is the present, this one right here, and this slide is on what's happening in the West Bank. So I was gonna talk a little bit about apartheid, and the fact that Israel is an apartheid state. Like I mentioned, when I go into Palestine, the roads are segregated, the water system is segregated. So this talks a little bit about the IDs. So in East Jerusalem, Palestinians live in one certain way. In the West Bank, that were subjected to restrictions, and then of course in Gaza, there's the siege. So Palestinians have been split in this way. So this just talks about this map here. But I don't know if anyone has any other specific questions.
What does the average Palestinian person, what's the outcome that they're looking for? I mean, a separate state, a certain region, what's the end game?
Before any of that, Palestinians just want to live. We're not there's a constant, and after that, it's the right of return. I mentioned earlier, you asked about eradication. It has nothing to do with eradicating the Jewish population. It's about Palestinians being allowed the right of return. Palestinians were with the Nakba and with so many people even today. An Israeli could go into a Palestinian's home and decide, this is my home now, and the Palestinians forced out of their home, as it is. So the goal is just the right to return, and the right to having a Palestinian state, and the right to self-determination, just to allow Palestinians are not allowed any rights, any equal rights. So just to have the rights of living. Like I said, today in people in Gaza, right now, the call in Gaza is we're calling for a ceasefire because, like I said, the people that are being targeted right now, the people that are being killed are civilians. They're Palestinians. Just today, they're every day. It's children, it's women, it's the men. Everyone the Palestinians that are living there are the ones targeted. They're being bombed, they're being killed, they're being deprived of basic needs. So it's just to be allowed the right to live and the right to safety and to life.
I can't help but comment, Basma. I completely agree the civilian life is a tragedy, absolutely. And most of those 5,000 people in Gaza were not part of the military at all. But I can't help point out that most of the 200 hostages are civilians. And most of the ones that were at that rave party were civilians for the Israelis. So it seems to cut both ways, right? I mean, you have to at least admit that.
Do you know how many Palestinians are under, first I want to ask the amount of Palestinians that are being detained illegally by Israel? There are thousands. And many are children, many are underage, many are not given any explanation of why they're being detained or why they're taken. Right now, in the West Bank, there's a mass arrest and mass amount of Palestinians that are being detained without knowing why. The other point I want to make is that all the ones, so if you've noticed that there was a release of some of the hostages, none were harmed. Today there was one, if you saw the interview, it was it was an older woman and her daughter. They said that they were treated fairly when there was one she said was injured and they took care of them. They said that there were the Hamas soldiers were taking care of them. One was sick and needed medical aid. They helped him. They protected them. But the fact of the matter is that these are settlers. They're not, and they chose to settle on land that is occupied. It's sad that hostages had to be taken, and it is because this is an active time of war. But if you look into it again, why I mentioned how many thousands of Palestinians are taken and not released. So the idea was that there's no equality in power. The fact that this happened, it just shows you there really isn't an equality in power. They said with those 200, compare it to the tens of thousands of Palestinians that are detained in Jewish jails, and those are citizens. They're not people that are fighting, or they're not military or whatever it is. Those are citizens, civilians.
Asma, after listening to you, talk about Palestine and the state, I'm just hoping that, the political powers around the world may help carve out a two-state solution, because that's one way to go. And irrespective of what you say or I say, things are very visible to everyone around the world. So I'm just hoping that Palestinian people get a fair share and hope to live safely for generations to come. And the same thing applies to Israel, because otherwise this is just going to continue, and there's always going to be issues about I said, she said, and this is how it is. And so there are different viewpoints, and each one supports their viewpoints, but hopefully we'll have peace, and that's important.
Basma, do you think that as a Palestinian, do you think the Palestinian people prefer a separate state, or do you want to be able to blend in and have the whole area opened up to both Israelis and Palestinians and whoever else wants to come, right?
Well, so I can't speak for every Palestinian. I'm only one, but I can't speak for everyone. But I can say that Palestinians, like I mentioned earlier, the goal is first just right to survival, right to basic needs being met, to basic safety. And then whether it's a one state or a two state is not the issue. The issue is to have self-determination and to have the right of returning to Palestine. Like I mentioned, as a Palestinian, there are many issues I face just trying to visit Palestine. Any Palestinian that lives there is under constant threat of being, whether they're in the West Bank, and there's the idea of always being constantly the threat of being arrested, and then in Gaza or anywhere, the threat of just not making it to another day, because there is the Israeli control here. And I touched on it earlier, but it's an apartheid state. So with all due respect, it's not about two sides. It's that Israel is a settler colonial state that is controlling Palestine. And this is the issue. It's not about two different people fighting for one area. It's that this outside entity came in and is undergoing all of these war crimes, undergoing all of this violation of basic human rights towards the Palestinians. An occupation.
I know the complexity here just gets deeper with every layer. What role do the surrounding, primarily Muslim countries, what role do they play? And perhaps what role does the United States play in this conflict?
So good question. I'll start with the US role. If you've seen the news, the US is a major ally of Israel. We're sending me as I live in New Jersey, billions of our tax dollars go to Israel, and it's not for humanitarian aid, it's for weapons. It's for supporting the bombing of the people of Gaza. Right now, they're preparing for a ground invasion by Israel, and they're waiting on U.S. troops to join them. And again, it's not Hamas. It's not some other political party or war fight or whatever it is, soldiers that they're fighting. It's civilians. So I think that America, we as a country, need to push back on this, on our tax dollars going to war. Just like we saw with the Iraq war, we funded how much money towards just killing innocent civilians. And then as for neighboring countries, I think each country has a different situation. So I don't know if you want me to speak to, what were you thinking? You were asking about specifically.
Jordan seems to be trying to stay pretty neutral in this whole thing, but there's just a lot of talk about Iran getting in with Hezbollah now attacking from the northern part of Israel. It seems to be escalating very quickly. That was my concern.
Well, because I could tell you more generally. So a lot of the neighboring Arab countries have normalized with Israel, meaning they've maintained political relations. So U.S. is an ally, and a lot of the neighboring Arab countries have normalized relations with Israel, recognized it as an Israeli state, and that's why. But as Palestinians, we critique that too. That how can you support it when again Israel violates UN laws and UN regulations in their treatment of Palestinians regularly. So I think globally there is an issue with the treatment of Palestine. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
I'm trying to find some clarification because I've kind of put my head in the sand until recently, but can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
I feel like I'm yelling. Okay, I'm just trying to find some clarification. So I certainly hear and empathize with you as a Palestinian, and I hear what you're saying about what's going on in the Gaza Strip, but I'm just trying to clarify for myself. So Hezbollah does not speak for the Palestine. Is Hezbollah a terrorist group, or are they truly speaking for all Palestinians?
They're a resistance group in Lebanon, not Palestine.
Hamas. So is Hamas the governing agent of Gaza and the Palestinian nation, or is Hamas a terrorist group that
is separate?
No, like I said, Hamas was elected by the people of Gaza, and they came into power after the second Intifada. They're the governing party
of Gaza.
There's different factions. So the Qassam brigades is one faction that led this, but Hamas is the major governing party in Gaza.
So I guess my concern is Hamas created this attack, and now the people of Gaza are being attacked because of them. So because of their actions.
And who's attacking the people of Gaza?
So from my understanding, is the Israel army is counterattacking Gaza as Hamas is the leader of Gaza.
Can I just say something? So in 2018, and I'm sure no one heard about this, in 2018, there was the Great March of Return. What was the Great March? The people of Gaza in masses decided that they are going to peacefully, non-violently march to the border in peaceful protest. Hundreds were shot by snipers as they were peacefully walking. And they continued to do this because they wanted to prove that they are non-violently protesting. No one heard about it. And again, no one's going to ever condone violence, but no one heard about it, and no one knew about it, and no one cared about it. There is, for the people of Gaza, since that, there's been, before right now, the siege, the current siege. So you said, like, you want to say, well, it happened because of Hamas, but first of all, Israel is Israel is attacking Gaza, and this is not the first time this has happened. It's happened 5 times before. Last year in Ramadan, because it always happens in Ramadan, when Palestinian Muslims are fasting, and it's a very holy month, I spent my Ramadan instead of fasting and focusing on my prayers and whatnot, I was watching all of the social media of how many of all the constant bombings of the people of Gaza, because they were indiscriminately getting bombed and killed, thousands, but no one heard about it that time. So again, I really want to challenge everyone to think about the portrayal of Palestinians in media. Really think. And you know, even the term, even the label of calling Hamas terrorists, Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist for a long time when he was participating in the boycott of the because he fought against the apartheid in South Africa. And I just want to, and again, we have to look at really the conditions of the people of Gaza. Like I mentioned earlier, it's called an open air prison. Palestinians are put on a calorie intake control. So Israel had measured how many calories it will. What I meant by that was Israel measured how many calories an average person needs, where technically, legally, they're being fed, but they're actually being malnourished and they're dying. Water, if you hear any firsthand accounts, if you go online and try to look at firsthand accounts of the people in Gaza, there are mothers saying, we don't know, we wish at least before our kids get bombed and killed, that they at least have something to eat, because they are dying either of the bombs or of starvation.
The folks in Hamas had taken the money that was used to build the tunnels and the fuel the rockets that have been launched into Israel since 2001. What if they had used that money instead to feed their own people and to build a decent economy?
Honestly, I'm going to ask if we can stop with these questions on the attack of Hamas, because a lot of this is stemming from either false narratives or stereotypes, and I'd like to ask that we not talk about this anymore. If anyone would like to talk about anything else or about the Holy Land, or we could end here. I'd like if that's okay with you, Scott.
You've been very gracious, and these are issues that we certainly haven't wrestled with to the depth that you have. And I appreciate you coming online and joining us. We are constantly praying for peace in the Middle East at church, and I'm sure that you are as well. And we'll continue the prayers for peace. So thank you for joining us. Appreciate you, and our concerns go out to all who are in the middle of that war.
Thank you. And I did link right here. This is a QR code. If you go on PAC USA's website, we have a resource guide. If you would like to look up any books, articles, documentaries about Palestine, you can do that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, we're going to be going to Greece instead of Holy Land here. And if anybody is interested in that, we can talk to me and we can have a conversation. So thank you for joining us all online. Appreciate that time together, and I'm sure this conversation will continue. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Does any